October 23rd, 1945, 2:15 in the morning, Saipan. They huddled in the darkness. 47 Japanese women, torn uniforms, hollow faces, weapons made from desperation, sharpened spoons filed against stone until edges could cut, broken chair legs gripped like clubs, pieces of twisted metal salvaged from ruins, anything that could kill before they were killed. The basement smelled of mold and fear and the particular stench that comes from bodies accepting death. They had hidden here for 6 weeks, drinking rainwater collected in helmet liners, eating weeds pulled from cracks in concrete, watching one of their own die from starvation 3 weeks ago, burying her under fallen beams because that was all the funeral the war allowed. Now the Americans had found them. Amiko Watanabe stood at the front, 34 years old, head nurse before titles stopped mattering, before rank dissolved into nothing but survival. She held a piece of iron rebar, 2 feet long, rust flaking off into her palm. Not much of a weapon, but enough. Enough to take one American with her before the end came. Maybe two if she was lucky. Behind her, 46 women waited, each holding their pathetic arsenal, each prepared to, rather than face what propaganda had promised would happen, what the films had shown them, what every officer had described in clinical detail designed to ensure cyanide seemed like mercy rather than murder. The sound of boots approached. Heavy, deliberate, American boots making sounds like hammers on wood. Each step a countdown, each footfall bringing them closer to whatever came next. Violence, degradation, everything the war had taught them to expect from demons wearing human faces. Emiko touched the glass capsule sewn into her uniform collar. Cyanide, small, light, barely heavier than hope itself. Lieutenant Ishikawa had distributed them in Manila 6 months ago. His voice had been calm, professional, matter of fact. Use it before capture. Death preserves honor. Capture destroys it forever. She had hidden the capsule but never swallowed it, too afraid of death, too desperate to see her daughter Yuki one more time, 7 years old in Tokyo, living with grandparents, drawing pictures of flowers, wanting to be a teacher. Would Yuki understand if her mother chose poison? Would she call it brave, or would she wonder why mother gave up without trying to survive? Beside Emiko stood Sakura Yoshida, 22 years old, radio operator turned propaganda broadcaster. Her voice had reached thousands, telling soldiers that Americans were animals, that capture meant torture, that death was preferable. Now she would face the enemy she had spent 2 years describing as monsters. On the other side stood Hana Tanaka, 19, youngest of the group, typist, filed paperwork for medical corps. She trembled so badly the metal in her hand rattled against the wall. Tick, 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 like a clock counting down to nothing. The door exploded inward, splintering wood. The crack echoed through the basement like gunfire. Bright work lights flooded in, blinding after weeks of darkness. The women squinted, raised their weapons, prepared for everything except what actually happened. Marines poured through the opening, young men in combat uniforms, helmets, rifles slung over shoulders, but not aimed, not pointed, just carried, like tools rather than threats, like equipment for a job rather than instruments of violence. And behind them, something impossible. Female nurses, American women in military uniforms, carrying medical bags marked with red crosses, canvas bags with supplies visible through open tops. Bandages, medicine, water canteens, the universal symbols of healing rather than harm. A young Marine stepped forward, maybe 22, farm boy features, wholesome looking, the kind of boy who should be working fields in Iowa, not leading squads into enemy basements on tropical islands thousands of miles from home. He spoke in English. Words that meant nothing to women who knew only Japanese, but his tone was gentle, calm, not the voice of someone preparing cruelty. A second man appeared, Japanese features, American uniform, a Nisei, caught between two worlds, two identities, two impossible loyalties. He spoke in Japanese. His accent was American, flat, missing the musical quality of Tokyo dialect, but understandable, clear, 5 words that made no sense. Ma'am, we're here to help. Help. The word hung in the air like smoke from a fire no one could see. Incomprehensible. In what universe did enemies help? In what version of reality did Americans offer assistance rather than retribution? This had to be strategy, psychological warfare, lower their defenses with kindness, then strike when guards were down. But the Marines were not holding rifles in ready positions. They held medical kits, green canvas bags, folded blankets. One Marine carried a stretcher. Another had bandages already visible in his pack. Water canteens hung from belts. Not ammunition, not weapons, supplies for healing. The translator spoke again. We have water, food, medical care. The war is over. You are prisoners now. Under Geneva Convention protection, we are taking you to a processing facility. Geneva Convention. The words were familiar. International agreement about prisoner treatment. Japan had signed it decades ago but never followed its provisions. Japanese military doctrine held that surrender was disgrace worse than death, that prisoners deserved nothing because honorable soldiers did not surrender. But America followed the convention, followed its rules, even when their enemy did not. Imiko did not know this. She only knew that the Americans standing in front of her looked tired, uncomfortable. One was sweating despite the cool morning air. They looked like men who wanted to be anywhere else, who wanted this war to be over so they could go home. They did not look like demons, and that realization was more terrifying than violence could have been. Imiko lowered her rebar slowly. Rust scraped against her palm. She held up both hands. Universal gesture. Behind her, 46 women did the same. Metal clattered against concrete as weapons fell. The sound echoed through the basement like everything they believed falling to pieces. 4 months earlier, April 1945, Manila. The propaganda film flickered on a white sheet hung against barracks wall. Grainy footage, obviously staged, but effective. Fear does not require high production values. Fear just needs images that stick in memory like thorns. American soldiers dragging Japanese civilians from homes. Women screaming, children crying, men beaten in streets while others watched helpless. The narrator spoke in crisp Tokyo dialect, professional, detached, describing atrocities with the same tone someone might use to discuss weather. The American shows no mercy, no honor, no civilization. When captured women face degradation beyond description, death is preferable. Death preserves dignity. Capture destroys it forever. The film showed more, things that made grown women look away, things designed to ensure cyanide capsules would seem like gifts rather than instruments of despair, things that guaranteed every woman watching would choose death over surrender. Emiko sat in the required front row. All medical personnel attended these viewings. No exceptions. You watched. You absorbed. You internalized the lesson that Americans were monsters wearing human faces. Lieutenant Ishikawa stood when the film ended. Career military, true believer, the kind of officer who thought honor was more valuable than life itself. He held a small wooden box. Inside rows of glass capsules wrapped in thin paper, each containing enough cyanide to kill in minutes. You will each receive one. Keep it with you always. If capture becomes certain, use it. Do not dishonor your families. Do not shame the emperor. The capsules were distributed. Emiko held hers in her palm, so small, so light, but heavy with meaning, heavy with the unspoken truth that her country expected her to die rather than become a burden. She thought about Yuki, 7 years old, drawing flowers, wanting to teach. Would Yuki understand? That night, Emiko sewed the capsule into her uniform collar. Her fingers shook. She pricked herself 3 times with the needle. Blood drops on white fabric. She washed them out, hid everything. That was becoming her specialty. Hiding truth, hiding fear, hiding the growing certainty that Japan was losing and nothing would ever be the same. The truck ride through Saipan was 20 minutes that felt like hours. 47 women packed in the back, sitting on metal benches. Canvas tarp overhead blocking most of the view, but through gaps Emiko could see. Buildings, some intact, windows with glass, doors on hinges, American efficiency made visible. Even in war zones, they built things that worked. The truck passed what looked like a small town. American military personnel everywhere, walking, talking, loading supplies, normal activities, the routine of occupation, of victory that felt permanent. And people, civilians, a woman carrying a basket, two children playing with a ball, living, existing, as if war had paused here rather than ended. One child waved at the truck, actually waved, smiling, as if a truck full of enemy prisoners was just another Tuesday afternoon sight. The casual gesture was more disturbing than hostility would have been. Sakura pressed her face against canvas, watching Saipan roll past. Her voice came out small, broken. They are just people. Look at them. They are just people like us. The processing center was a long wooden building, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Harsh, clinical. The women were divided into groups, led to different stations, names recorded by a woman with a clipboard who wrote Japanese characters slowly, carefully, as if each stroke mattered. Then came medical examination. The moment Emiko had dreaded. This was where they would discover weaknesses, where Americans would see them at their most vulnerable, where whatever came next would begin. A female officer directed her toward a curtained area. Behind the curtain waited a woman in white, nurse uniform, small cap pinned to brown hair streaked with gray, maybe 40 years old. She smiled when Emiko entered, said something in English, gentle voice, warm tone. The nurse gestured toward a chair, made motions indicating Emiko should sit. Remove jacket, simple requests. No force, no violence, just medical procedure. Emiko complied slowly. Every movement felt like stepping toward a cliff edge. The jacket came off. Underneath, her uniform was torn, stained, evidence of months surviving in ruins. The nurse did not recoil, did not show disgust, just made notes on clipboard. Then she noticed Emiko's arm, the infected wound from shrapnel 3 weeks ago. She touched it gently. So gently, Emiko almost cried. When had anyone last touched her with care rather than necessity? The nurse called out something. Another nurse appeared, younger, maybe 24, dark hair and neat bun. They spoke rapidly, professional, no mockery, no cruelty. They cleaned the wound, used antiseptic that stung, bandaged it properly with clean white gauze. The younger nurse patted Emiko's shoulder. Sympathetic gesture, human to human. Then they checked other things. Eyes, throat, lungs. When they discovered severe malnutrition, the older nurse's face showed concern, real concern. Not satisfaction that the enemy was suffering. Just medical professional, worried about a patient. No one hit Emiko. No one touched her inappropriately. No one even raised a voice. The examination was clinical, thorough, kind. Everything propaganda had said would not happen was not happening. When it was over, they gave her a cup of water, told her through gestures to drink slowly. The water was clean, cold, the best thing she had tasted in months. She held the cup with both hands, felt tears start, could not stop them. The nurses did not comment, just gave her a moment, let her cry, then helped her to her feet and directed her to the next station. One by one, 47 women processed, each examination identical, professional, careful. When they found malnutrition, they noted it. When they discovered injuries, they treated them. When women flinched at touch, they moved slower, spoke softer. The bathing facility was next. Large room with metal tubs arranged along walls. Steam rising from water inside, hot water. Hot, real hot water, the kind they had not experienced in months. Soap sat on shelves. White bars smelling like flowers, lavender maybe, clean towels stacked in neat piles. Female nurses supervising. Maintaining privacy, ensuring dignity even for prisoners, the translator explained. Remove clothing, wash thoroughly, clean garments provided after. Simple instructions. No threats, no humiliation. The women undressed awkwardly, trying to maintain modesty. They had lived in bays and bunkers, in ruins, no running water for 6 weeks. Their skin was gray with accumulated dirt, hair matted, bodies marked with bruises and the particular fragility that comes from extended starvation. The hot water was painful at first, almost scalding against skin that had forgotten warmth. But as they sank into tubs, as heat penetrated exhausted muscles, something inside them broke. Hana submerged her head, came up gasping, water streaming down face mixing with tears, then sobbing, not quiet crying. Full body sobs that echoed off tile walls. Around her, other women began crying too. Deep, wrenching sounds, releasing weeks of terror, months of propaganda, years of war. The American nurses watched with sad faces. They did not look triumphant, did not look satisfied, just looked sad. Human compassion for human suffering, regardless of nationality or uniform. One nurse approached Hannah, knelt beside the tub, spoke softly in English that Hannah could not understand, but tone was clear. Comfort, support, the universal language of one woman helping another through crisis. Emiko washed her hair for the first time in 2 months. The water at her feet turned gray, then brown, then almost black. She scrubbed her skin until it was pink and raw, until she could feel individual nerve endings again, until she remembered what it meant to be clean. When they emerged, simple cotton clothes waited, not uniforms, not prison garb, just plain gray shirts and pants, clean, whole. They dressed reverently, touching fabric that did not have holes or blood stains or the smell of death woven into threads. Then came the thing that shattered the last of their psychological defenses. The mess tent smelled like home and impossibility combined. Rice, real rice, steaming and perfect. Something grilling that made Emiko's stomach clench with desperate hunger. Her mouth water, her knees weaken. Inside, American soldiers ate at tables on one side, section cleared for Japanese women on other. Not cruel segregation, just organization. The soldiers mostly ignored the women, focused on their own meals and conversations. Then food arrived, trays placed in front of each woman, white rice, fluffy and perfect. Each grain separate, steaming, the way rice should be but had not been for years in war-starved Japan. Grilled mackerel, beautifully prepared, skin crispy, flesh tender. Miso soup, real miso soup, made by someone who understood dashi, who knew proportions, who cared about flavor. Pickled vegetables, sukumono, proper technique, traditional preparation. Hot green tea in simple cups. This was not American food. This was Japanese food, prepared correctly, with care, with attention to detail that spoke of respect rather than mere compliance with feeding regulations. Emiko picked up chopsticks with hands that would not stop shaking. She had not seen a full meal like this in 6 months. Rations on Saipan had dwindled to almost nothing. They had eaten weeds, roots, insects when they could catch them. Anything to survive one more day. She took a bite of rice. The texture flooded her senses. Perfect, warm, life-sustaining. She closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. Then another. Then she was crying into her rice bowl while trying to eat at the same time. Salt water mixing with rice. Grief and gratitude inseparable. Around her, 46 women having identical experiences. Some ate slowly, savoring every bite. Others ate frantically, afraid food would vanish if they did not consume it immediately. A few could not eat at all, too overwhelmed by contradiction to function. Hana suddenly dropped her chopsticks, covered her face with both hands, began sobbing, deep wrenching sounds that made nearby American soldiers look over with concern. A nurse approached quickly, knelt beside the girl. The translator came over. "What is wrong? Are you hurt?" Hana shook her head, could not speak. Emiko answered for her in Japanese. "She is confused. We were told you would hurt us. Instead, you feed us. Japanese food, prepared correctly, with care. This makes no sense." The translator relayed this to the nurse. Her face showed something like sadness. She patted Hannah's shoulder gently, stood, left them to their meal without judgment, without mockery, just human acknowledgement of human confusion. Emiko continued eating. Each bite was confirmation that everything they had been taught was lies, complete fabrications. If Americans were not demons about food, what else had been lies? If they showed this much care to prisoners, What did that say about the war, about everything she had believed for 34 years? The rice stuck in her throat. Not from quality, from revelation. From the crushing weight of understanding that maybe the enemy was more humane than her own government had ever been. Keiko Sato sat across from Amiko, 38 years old, administrative officer, true believer in Bushido code. She ate mechanically, face rigid, refusing to acknowledge the quality of food, refusing to let kindness penetrate ideology. But Amiko saw her hands shake, saw her eyes close for just a moment when the miso soup hit her tongue, saw the crack forming in certainty. That night they were taken to barracks. Inside, rows of cots lined the walls. Each had a thin mattress, a pillow, a folded blanket. After months of sleeping on cave floors and concrete rubble, the sight of actual beds made several women stop in the doorway. They filed in slowly, each choosing a cot, testing mattresses with disbelief, sitting carefully as if furniture might be illusion. Hana lay down and stared at the ceiling, actually stared at a ceiling that was not rock or broken concrete, just wooden planks, solid, real. A young American guard entered, maybe 20, tall, Iowa farmer probably. He hung a kerosene lamp from a center hook, said something in English that none understood, paused, tried to think of what else to say, gave up, nodded, left. He did not lock the door. The detail registered slowly. Unlocked door. They were prisoners in an unlocked barracks. They could walk out. Not that there was anywhere to go, not that escape was possible from an island, but the symbolism mattered. Trust, or at least absence of fear. Silence fell over the barracks. Women organized watches instinctively, 4 awake at a time, others attempting sleep. But sleep would not come. Every sound outside triggered alarm. Footsteps, voices, trucks, each noise potential threat. Emiko lay in her cot, staring at ceiling, thinking about Yuki, 7 years old, probably taller now, maybe learning to read. Was she even alive? Had Tokyo survived the firebombing? Had her parents kept Yuki safe? Or was Emiko surviving alone while everyone she loved was ash? The questions had no answers. Only time would tell. Only going home would reveal what remained, if anything remained. Around midnight they heard it. Footsteps. Multiple people. Approaching the barracks. Women who had been trying to sleep sat up. Hearts began pounding. This was it. Whatever Americans had been planning, waiting for. It was happening now. Emiko stood, face set with determination. If they were coming for the women, they would have to go through her first. Other women quietly picked up anything that could serve as weapons. Shoes. Belts. One still had a sharp piece of metal hidden. The footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle turned. Emiko braced herself, ready to fight, ready to die, ready for anything except what actually happened. The door opened. 3 Americans stood there. 2 soldiers. One was the older female officer from medical. They carried bundles in their arms. Not weapons, not torture implements, just bundles wrapped in fabric. The officer spoke. The translator appeared from behind them. His voice came soft, almost apologetic. The temperature drops at night. We brought extra blankets and hot tea. The words took time to process. Blankets, tea. They walked in slowly, deliberately non-threatening, placed wool blankets on empty cots. One soldier carried a large thermos and stack of cups. He poured tea, handed it to outstretched, shaking hands. The smell was chamomile and honey, sweet, warm, impossible. The captain looked at Emiko, made eye contact, nodded once, recognition, respect, one leader to another. Then she spoke again through the translator. Sleep well, you are safe here. Then they left, closing the door quietly behind them. No lecture, no demands, no threat of what would happen if the women did not behave. Just blankets and tea, and the quiet suggestion that rest was important. For a long moment, nobody moved. 47 women frozen in disbelief, processing what just happened, trying to reconcile it with everything they knew about war, about enemies, about reality itself. Then Hana started laughing. Strange sound, almost hysterical, but not mad. liberating. Blankets. They brought us blankets. Her voice carried wonder and confusion in equal measure. The absurdity of it. The impossible kindness of it. Enemies bringing comfort in darkness. Victors ensuring prisoners stayed warm. Other women began laughing too. Sound mixing with crying. Bodies shaking with release of tension so powerful it was almost violent. Not joy exactly, not relief. Something more complex. Recognition that their worldview had shattered completely. That they were adrift in reality where enemies showed mercy and prisoners received comfort and nothing made sense anymore. Emiko picked up one of the blankets. Thick, warm, smelled faintly of storage and soap. She wrapped it around her shoulders, held her cup of tea in both hands, felt heat seep into her palms. This was real. This was actually happening. Americans had come to their barracks at midnight, not to hurt them, to bring blankets because the temperature dropped, because humans deserve to be warm, because Geneva Convention had rules and Americans followed them even when their enemy did not. Sakura sat on her cot, holding her tea, staring at nothing. Her voice came out barely above whisper. I told lies about them. For 2 years I broadcast propaganda. I said they were animals, monsters. I said capture meant torture, and they bring us blankets. No one responded. What could they say? That yes, propaganda had been lies, that their government had lied about everything, that maybe Americans were more civilized than the empire that called itself superior. Ayako Nakamura spoke from her cot. 28 years old, nurse from Nagasaki. Her family was still there. She did not know yet that in less than a year, atomic fire would erase them from existence. My grandmother told me stories about the Russo-Japanese War, about how Russians treated Japanese prisoners. She said some Russians were kind, some were cruel, but all followed rules. She said civilization is not about winning. It is about what you refuse to do even when you have power. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, heavy with the growing understanding that maybe Japan had lost more than a war. Maybe they had lost their way, lost sight of what civilization meant, lost the ability to see humanity in enemies. Emiko sipped her tea. The warmth spread through her chest, down into her belly, radiating outward until she could feel her fingers and toes for the first time in weeks. Not from cold, from the simple act of caring, of being seen as human rather than just enemy. That night marked something. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of possibility. The understanding that maybe propaganda had been wrong, that maybe Americans were human, that maybe survival meant more than just staying alive. Maybe it meant learning to see the world as it actually was, rather than as they had been taught to see it. Sleep came eventually, fitful, confused, but real. And when dawn broke over the camp, 47 women woke to their first full day as prisoners of an enemy that refused to be demons. An enemy that insisted on following rules, on treating them with basic dignity, on bringing blankets at midnight because temperatures dropped and humans deserved to be warm. Whether they were ready for that truth or not, it was the truth they would have to learn to live with. November 1945, the second week. Morning came with the sound of a bell, sharp, metallic, cutting through the tropical air like a blade through silk. The women woke slowly, disoriented, having to remember where they were, that they were prisoners, that they were alive, that the world had changed overnight in ways they still could not fully process. Emiko sat up. Her body ached less than it had in months. The mattress was thin but real. The pillow had supported her neck rather than leaving it kinked and painful. The blanket they had brought at midnight still lay across her legs, physical proof that kindness had been real. Not dream, not hallucination, actual mercy from actual enemies. Breakfast was served in the same mess tent. Rice porridge, grilled fish, pickled vegetables, hot tea. Simple meal, but more food than most of them had seen in half a year. Emiko ate slowly, letting each bite register, letting her body remember what it meant to be fed rather than just fed enough to survive. Across from her, Hannah ate quickly, 19 years old and still possessing the metabolism of youth. She finished her portion and looked longingly at the serving line, wanting more but too afraid to ask. An American soldier noticed. Young, maybe 23. He gestured toward the line, made eating motions, universal communication. Hana looked at Emiko, uncertain. Emiko nodded, permission granted. The girl stood, walked to the line, pointed at the rice. The server smiled, gave her a second helping without hesitation, without judgment, as if feeding hungry prisoners was the most natural thing in the world. When Hana returned to the table, her eyes were wet. She ate her second helping more slowly, savoring it, understanding finally sinking in that they would not be starved here. That food was available. That survival was possible. After breakfast came work assignments. The translator gathered them in the courtyard, explained through careful Japanese that prisoners were expected to work. Light labor, nothing dangerous, nothing that violated Geneva Convention provisions about prisoner employment. Laundry, cleaning, food preparation, kitchen assistance. They would be paid in camp script. Could use it at the small canteen to buy items. Paid. The word registered slowly. Prisoners being paid for work, given money to spend as they chose. Another contradiction to add to the growing pile. Emiko was assigned to laundry detail. She stood in front of large metal tubs filled with hot water and soap, washing American uniforms, folding sheets, hanging towels to dry in the tropical sun. The work was hard, repetitive, but also mindless, allowing her thoughts to drift while her hands stayed busy. She thought about Yuki constantly, 7 years old. Did she still remember her mother? Had she been told Emiko was dead or missing, or simply gone to war with no guarantee of return? The uncertainty was worse than knowing. Not knowing meant imagining every possibility, and imagination in wartime was cruel. The American soldiers brought their laundry in canvas bags, dropped them off in the morning, picked them up in the evening. Some nodded to Emiko, some ignored her completely. One young soldier always said something in English when he picked up his bag, the same phrase every time. She did not know what it meant, but his tone was friendly, almost apologetic, as if he felt bad that she was washing his clothes. Corporal Daniel Hayes was different, 20 years old, tall, corn-fed looking, Iowa farmer written all over his face. He tried to learn Japanese, carried a small phrase book in his pocket, pulled it out whenever he saw the women working, pointed at objects, said the English word, then tried to pronounce the Japanese equivalent. Soap, he would say, then carefully, second. His pronunciation was terrible, flat, missing all the subtle tones, but the effort was genuine, real. And some of the women found themselves helping him, correcting his mistakes, teaching him proper inflection, engaging in the most normal human interaction imaginable. Language exchange between people who should be enemies but were slowly becoming something else. Sakura was assigned to kitchen duty, helping prepare vegetables for evening meals, peeling potatoes, chopping onions. Simple tasks but surrounded by food, by abundance, by the constant reminder that America had so much while Japan had nothing. She worked alongside an American woman, cook's assistant, maybe 30, blonde hair tied back with a bandana. She hummed while she worked. Some American song Sakura did not recognize. The woman caught Sakura watching her, smiled, offered her a piece of chocolate from her pocket. Sakura stared at the chocolate. Small brown square wrapped in foil. She had not seen chocolate in years, not since before the war when her father had brought some home from a business trip to Manchuria. That felt like another lifetime, another world, another version of herself who believed Japan was invincible. The woman gestured, offering again. Sakura took the chocolate with shaking hands, unwrapped it carefully, put it in her mouth, let it melt on her tongue. The sweetness was almost painful, rich, complex, everything scarce and rationed and impossible made solid and real. She started crying right there in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face while chocolate melted in her mouth, and an American woman patted her shoulder with the universal gesture of comfort that transcends language and nationality and war. Daily routine established itself quickly. Wake at dawn, breakfast, work detail, lunch, more work, dinner, evening in barracks. The sameness was both reassuring and unsettling. Where was the cruelty they expected? Where was the degradation propaganda had promised? The camp had a small canteen, open twice a week, Prisoners could spend their earned script on items. The first time the women were allowed to visit, they approached it like explorers entering unknown territory, uncertain what they would find, uncertain if this was another test, another trick designed to reveal something about them that would justify harsher treatment. Inside shelves held items that seemed impossible: chocolate bars, cigarettes, writing paper, pencils, small toiletries, toothbrushes, combs, soap that smelled like flowers, all arranged neatly with prices listed in script. Affordable, accessible, real. Amiko stood in front of the chocolate display, staring. In Japan, chocolate had disappeared years ago. Luxury items vanished first, then staple items. Then anything that was not rice or barley or whatever could be grown in victory gardens that produced barely enough to keep people from starving outright. And here, in a prisoner of war camp, she could buy chocolate. She picked up a bar, felt its weight, its realness. The price was listed. She had enough script from 1 week of work. She bought it, then bought another, and another, thinking about Yuki, thinking about proof that mother survived, proof that Americans were not monsters, proof that maybe the world was more complex than propaganda allowed. That night, she placed the chocolate bars in her footlocker. 3 brown bars wrapped in bright paper. She would save them, give them to Yuki when they were reunited, if they were reunited. The uncertainty gnawed at her, but the chocolate was hope made tangible, evidence that good things still existed, that sweetness survived even in bitter times. The third week brought movie night. Americans organized outdoor screening. White sheet hung between poles. Projector set up. Folding chairs arranged in rows. Japanese women invited to attend. Not ordered. Invited. As if their presence was optional. As if their comfort mattered. Most went, curious despite themselves. The film was American comedy, physical humor, man slipping on banana peel, chase scene through department store, things that transcended language because bodies moving in funny ways need no translation. The women found themselves laughing, actually laughing, at enemy entertainment, at American jokes, at the absurdity of sitting in folding chairs watching movies while being prisoners of war. Afterward, walking back to barracks, the women were quiet. Something had shifted. They had spent an evening being entertained by their captors, sharing space with American soldiers without fear, laughing at the same jokes, existing in the same moment as humans rather than as victor and defeated. Hana voiced what others were thinking. Is it wrong to laugh, to enjoy things? We are prisoners. We are supposed to suffer. That is what prisoners do. Emiko had no answer. She did not know anymore what prisoners were supposed to do, or what being Japanese meant in this new world where everything they had been taught was revealed as fiction. Sergeant James Crawford watched from the perimeter. 35 years old, combat veteran, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Iwo Jima. His brother David had died at Iwo, 19 years old, killed on black volcanic sand on February 23rd. Crawford had been there, had watched his youngest brother die, had carried that rage for 8 months like a stone in his chest. He had volunteered for this assignment, guard duty at prisoner of war camp, thinking it would be easy, thinking he could hate them properly. Make them pay in small ways for what their people had done to David. But nothing was working out the way he expected. These Japanese women were not soldiers. They were clerks, nurses, radio operators. They had filed papers and treated patients and typed reports. They had not pulled triggers at Iwo, had not thrown grenades, had not killed David. But they wore the uniform. They served the empire. They were complicit in the system that sent boys to die on remote islands for causes that made less sense with every passing day. He watched them laugh at the movie, watched Hana get a second helping at breakfast, watched Sakura cry over chocolate, watched Emiko carefully save chocolate bars in her footlocker, and something in his chest began to crack. The rage that had sustained him, that had given him purpose, that had made David's death mean something. It was crumbling under the weight of watching scared women slowly remember how to be human again. Dr. Robert Chen found Crawford on perimeter patrol one evening. Chen was 58, Chinese-American, camp physician, World War I veteran. He had seen enough war to recognize what it did to men, how it twisted them, how rage became identity when everything else was taken away. You watch them a lot, Sergeant. Crawford said nothing, kept his eyes on the barracks where women were settling in for the night, making sure they do not cause trouble. They are not going to cause trouble. They are terrified, confused, slowly realizing everything they were taught was lies. Good. Chen was quiet for a moment, then spoke with the careful precision of someone who had thought about these words for a long time. I was in France, 1918, hated Germans for years after, watched boys die in trenches, watched them drown in mud, watched them burn. Then I had to treat German prisoners, had to see their wounds, hear them cry for mothers, had to watch them die the same way American boys died. Crawford did not respond, but he listened. Your brother, he was 19. Yes, these women, clerks, nurses, typists, they did not kill your brother. Japanese soldiers on Iwo Jima killed him. Infantry who pulled triggers, officers who gave orders, generals who started the war. You want to hate someone? Hate them. Do not hate scared girls who filed papers. Crawford walked away, but the seed was planted. He could not unsee Hana's youth, could not unhear Sakura's crying, could not ignore that they were human, flawed, complicated, real. David would not have wanted hate. David had been soft, always helping, always choosing kindness, always believing people were good until proven otherwise. That softness had gotten him killed, but it had also made him David, made him the best of the three brothers, the one who should have survived if the world had any justice. The fourth week brought inspection. Lieutenant Thomas Wright conducting routine barracks check, 28 years old, by the book administrator, the kind of officer who believed rules existed for reasons and should be followed precisely. He moved through the barracks methodically, checking footlockers, examining personal items, ensuring no contraband, no weapons, no materials that could be used for escape or sabotage. He found the sharpened spoons under Keiko Sato's mattress, 3 of them, filed to points, hidden in cloth wrapping. Also a piece of metal sharpened to a dangerous edge. Keiko had kept them, even after weeks of decent treatment, even after blankets at midnight and Japanese food and work assignments that paid. She had kept weapons because fear does not disappear overnight, because years of propaganda do not vanish in weeks, because some part of her still believed the kindness was temporary, that the real Americans would emerge eventually. Wright held up the spoons. His face was hard, angry. This is a security violation. On prisoners, this changes everything. He confronted Captain Margaret Sullivan in her office, 40 years old, chief medical officer, the woman who had brought blankets at midnight, who had examined injuries with gentle hands, who had promised the women they were safe. They are still armed, still planning something. Regulations say armed prisoners must be transferred to higher security facility. Sullivan stood. Her voice was calm but firm, steel wrapped in silk. One woman kept one set of weapons, out of fear, not intent. One set is one too many. What if she attacks someone? What if she tries to escape? What if this is preparation for coordinated action? Look at her file. Keiko Sato, 38 years old, administrative officer, true believer. She has been indoctrinated her entire adult life to believe Americans are demons. That belief does not vanish because we bring blankets. It takes time, patience, understanding. Wright's jaw was tight. Regulations are clear. Regulations also say prisoners must be treated humanely, that we assess threats individually, that we use judgment. I am using judgment. Keiko is not a threat. She is a frightened woman holding on to weapons because letting go means accepting that everything she believed was wrong. That is terrifying. If something happens, if she hurts someone, this is on you. I accept that responsibility. Wright left, angry, but Sullivan had authority. The women could stay, but Keiko was confined to barracks for 1 week. No work detail, no canteen privileges, just time to think about choices and consequences. The other women were angry at Keiko, not at her for keeping weapons. They understood that impulse, but angry that she had risked their safety, their tentative security, their slowly building hope that maybe survival was possible. Emiko confronted her that evening, quiet conversation in corner of barracks where others could not hear. You endangered all of us. If they move us to another camp, we lose Captain Sullivan. We lose Dr. Chen. We lose the guards who are learning to see us as human. We lose everything we have built here. Keiko's face was rigid, 38 years old and carved from stone. Built? We have built nothing. We are prisoners. We are disgraced. We should be dead. Every day we survive is another day of shame. Is eating shame? Is sleeping in a bed? Shame is being treated with dignity? Shame. Yes, all of it. We are supposed to resist, supposed to fight, supposed to base before accepting enemy mercy. Emiko's voice dropped lower, harder. My daughter is 7 years old. If I die here, she has no mother. If I resist and they punish us, I never see her again. If I fight and they retaliate, 46 other women suffer. I chose survival, not for me, for Yuki, and for every woman in this barracks who deserves a chance to go home. Keiko said nothing, but her hands shook, the first crack in her certainty. The isolation was hard. Keiko sat in the barracks while other women worked. While they earned script and bought items at the canteen and slowly built routines that resembled life rather than mere existence. She sat alone with her thoughts and her weapons that had been confiscated and her ideology that was crumbling under the weight of lived experience. She thought about her family in Osaka, her husband, her 2 sons. Were they alive? The city had been firebombed. She had received no letters, no information. The Red Cross had no records of them. They could be dead, could be alive, could be somewhere in between, surviving but starving, living but barely. And she was here, being fed, being treated well, being shown mercy she had been taught did not exist. The contradiction was unbearable. On the 5th day of her confinement, she made a decision. Early morning, 4 a.m., before other women woke, before guards changed shifts, the quiet hour when the world holds its breath between darkness and dawn. Keiko took the belt from her uniform, strong canvas, military issue, designed to hold weight. She walked to the latrine building, separate structure, single room, exposed beam running across ceiling. She fashioned a noose, her hands did not shake. She had decided. This was the honorable choice, the only choice that preserved dignity. Her family would understand. The emperor would understand. She was choosing death over dishonor, choosing principle over survival, choosing ideology over the terrible mercy of enemies who refused to be demons. She stood on the toilet, secured the noose, slipped it over her neck. The canvas was rough against her skin. She thought of her sons, hoped they would understand, hoped they would call her brave rather than broken. She stepped off. Ayako Nakamura found her, the nurse from Nagasaki, 28 years old, early riser, always first to the latrine. She opened the door and saw Keiko hanging, body limp, face purple, rope creaking. Ayako screamed. The sound cut through the morning like a knife. Primal, terrified, bringing women running from barracks, bringing guards sprinting from posts, bringing Captain Margaret Sullivan from her quarters still in pajamas, hair loose around shoulders. No time for military bearing, just emergency response. Sullivan burst into the latrine, saw Keiko, pulled scissors from medical bags she always carried, cut the rope with 2 decisive cuts. Keiko collapsed. Sullivan caught her, lowered her to floor, checked pulse. Nothing. No breath, no heartbeat. Gone. But Sullivan did not give up. She started CPR, chest compressions, 30 at a time, hard, fast, breaking rhythm that pushes blood through unmoving heart. Then rescue breaths, forcing air into lungs that had forgotten how to inflate. Come on, come on, do not you dare die on me. Her voice was fierce, angry, desperate. She compressed, she breathed, she willed life back into body that had chosen death. Dr. Chen arrived, joined the effort. 2 medical professionals fighting against ideology and despair, and the terrible weight of believing the only honorable choice is death. 3 minutes. 4. 5. Longer than most people could survive without oxygen. Longer than brain cells remain viable. Long enough that hope becomes cruel rather than kind. Then Keiko gasped, weak, ragged, but air entering lungs, pulse returning, faint but present. life choosing to stay despite everything. They carried her to medical bay, laid her on bed, monitored vitals. She was unconscious but breathing, alive but barely. Sullivan collapsed into chair beside the bed, exhausted, emotionally wrecked. She had made a promise to protect these women, even ones who did not want protection, even ones who chose death over her mercy. Hours passed, morning became afternoon. Keiko remained unconscious. Sullivan remained at her bedside, refusing to leave, refusing to accept that she might have failed. That promising protection meant nothing if the person you promised to protect wanted to die. Finally, evening. Keiko's eyes opened. Unfocused at first, confused, then clarity returning, understanding dawning. She was alive, still alive, despite her best efforts, despite her careful planning, despite choosing honor over existence. Sullivan leaned forward. Her face was haggard, exhausted, but her eyes were clear. The translator was called, came quickly. Sullivan spoke through him. Her voice was not gentle. It was hard, angry, the anger of someone who has fought for a life and won, but barely. Why did you do this? Keiko's voice came out hoarse, damaged from the rope. I should be dead. It is honorable to die, shameful to survive. No, the word was flat, absolute, no room for argument. It is honorable to live, to heal, to rebuild, to go home to your family, to survive so that your sons know their mother chose them over ideology. But I am prisoner. I am disgraced. Sullivan's face softened slightly. Just slightly, but enough to show the humanity beneath the anger. You are a patient, under my care, and I will not let you die, not because regulations require it, because life is sacred, even enemy life, even when that enemy wants to die. Keiko stared at her, processing, trying to reconcile this with everything she believed. Sullivan continued, I made a promise to protect you, all of you. I keep my promises, so you do not get to choose death, not while you are under my care. You get to choose to heal. You get to choose to go home. You get to choose to tell your son that their mother survived. Those are your choices now. The words hung in the air, heavy, inescapable. Keiko began to cry, not quiet tears, sobbing, the sound of ideology breaking, of certainty crumbling, of a worldview shattering under the weight of impossible mercy. Sullivan stayed with her through the night, did not leave, did not delegate her care to nurses, stayed personally, making sure Keiko breathed, making sure she lived, making sure the promise held. The news spread through camp quickly. All 47 women gathered outside medical bay, waiting, hoping, fearing. When they were told Keiko would survive, the relief was collective, physical. They had not realized how much they needed her to live, how much her survival meant that maybe they could all survive, that maybe choosing life over death was acceptable, that maybe honor had more faces than they had been taught. Crawford witnessed the aftermath, saw Sullivan exhausted, saw her emotionally destroyed by the effort of saving someone who had tried to die, saw her absolute commitment to keeping her promise regardless of cost. Something in him shifted, cracked, the last wall between hate and understanding. These Americans actually cared, not because regulations required it, not because Geneva Convention mandated it, because they believed it. Because Captain Sullivan had made a promise, and promises mattered more than anything else, more than nationality, more than war, more than the rage Crawford had carried for 8 months. That evening he went to his quarters, opened his footlocker, pulled out a small box. Inside were dog tags. David Crawford, age 19, USMC, blood type O positive, died February 23, 1945, Iwo Jima. His most precious possession. His last connection to his brother. The physical proof that David had existed, that he had mattered, that his death meant something. Crawford held the tags in his hand, felt their weight, made a decision. David would not have wanted hate. David would have helped. David was soft and kind and believed in choosing mercy even when vengeance was easier. It was time to honor David properly, not with rage, with the kindness his brother had embodied. December came with unexpected cold, tropical island experiencing unusual weather. Temperature dropping at night to levels locals said were unprecedented. The barracks had no heating. The wooden structure designed for tropical climate, not for cold snaps that turned breath visible and made fingers numb. The women huddled under their blankets, the ones brought at midnight weeks ago. But one blanket was not enough. They shivered through nights, waking with stiff joints and aching bodies. No one complained. Complaining was not done. But the cold was undeniable. December 18th, evening. Rain began, cold rain, driven by wind that found every gap in the barracks walls. Water leaked through the roof, dripping onto cots, soaking blankets, making everything damp and miserable. Then the heating system failed. The small coal stove that provided minimal warmth stopped working. Smoke backed up, filled the barracks with choking fumes. Women stumbled outside coughing, cold rain soaking them immediately, standing in darkness, uncertain what would happen next. Vehicles arrived. Trucks, engines running, lights blazing, Americans jumping out, moving quickly, efficiently. The translator appeared, shouting over the rain. The heating system is broken, cannot be fixed until morning. We are moving you to another barracks with working heat. Gather your belongings quickly. The women scrambled, collecting their few possessions, letters, photographs, chocolate bars, small items that meant everything, loading onto trucks, driving through rain to another building. This barracks was larger, better insulated, potbelly stove in corner glowing with heat. The warmth hit them as they entered, almost painful after hours of cold. They filed in slowly, found cots, better cots, thicker mattresses, and on each cot, care packages, small bundles wrapped in brown paper. Captain Sullivan stood inside, soaked from rain, hair plastered to skull, but smiling. Tired smile, satisfied smile. "We apologize for the inconvenience," she said through the translator. "The packages are for you, extra items you might need." The women opened packages with shaking hands. Inside, thick wool socks, flannel shirts, soap, combs, and chocolate, 1 bar each. Small luxury in the midst of emergency. Emiko held her package, stared at contents, could not speak, could not process that in the middle of equipment, failure in rain and cold. Americans had prepared care packages, had thought about comfort items, had included chocolate because maybe sweetness helped when everything was hard. Soldiers wheeled in cart with large pot of soup, hot soup, steam rising, cups distributed. The women drank, warmth spreading through bodies, thawing frozen fingers, bringing sensation back to numb faces. Sullivan moved among them, checking on each woman, asking through translator if anyone needed medical attention, if anyone was too cold, too wet, too anything. Her concern was genuine, real, maternal almost. As if these prisoners were children under her protection rather than enemies defeated in war. Hannah started crying again, seemed to be her default response to kindness. She held the flannel shirt to her face, felt its softness, smelled its newness, could not reconcile this care with anything she had been taught about enemies. Emiko sat on her new cot, wrapped in new blanket, wearing wool socks, drinking hot soup, looking around at 46 other women having identical experiences. All of them warm, all of them fed, all of them safe. And she understood finally, completely, without reservation. The Americans were not being kind because they were weak. They were being kind because they believed it was right. They followed rules even when it was harder. They treated prisoners well even when those prisoners had served the enemy. They brought blankets at midnight and care packages during storms because humanity mattered more than victory. This was not weakness. This was civilization. This was what separated humans from animals. This was what her daughter needed to know. That mercy existed. That rules mattered. That even in the darkest times, some people chose to be better than circumstances required. That night, for the first time since capture, all 47 women slept without keeping watch. No one stayed awake. No one maintained vigilance. They slept, truly slept, wrapped in enemy blankets, in enemy barracks, under enemy guard, and they felt safe. January 1946, the final weeks, news came through official channels, repatriation scheduled, Japanese prisoners returning home. ships being prepared. Processing would begin within 6 weeks. The announcement should have brought joy, relief, the promise of going home, seeing family, resuming lives interrupted by war. Instead, it brought dread, because home was not home anymore. Home was destroyed cities, starving people, occupation forces, and women who had survived captivity while others starved would face questions, judgment, the unspoken accusation that maybe they had done something shameful to survive, that maybe their health and relative wellness was proof of collaboration, or worse. Emiko lay awake at night thinking about Yuki, 7 years old. Would she even recognize her mother? Emiko had left Tokyo thin but strong. She was returning heavier, better fed. Her face was full. Her skin had color. She looked healthier than she had before the war consumed everything. How could she face her daughter looking well-fed? How could she explain that while Yuki probably starved, mother ate rice and fish and miso soup prepared correctly by enemies who cared more about prisoner welfare than her own government had cared about civilian survival? The guilt was crushing, physical weight pressing down on chest, making it hard to breathe. She had survived. That should be enough. That should be everything. But survival came with a price. The knowledge that her wellness was built on American food, American medicine, American mercy. And accepting that mercy felt like betrayal of everyone who had suffered without it. Sakura felt it differently. Her guilt was older, deeper. 2 years of broadcasting propaganda. Her voice telling soldiers that Americans were demons. That capture meant torture. That death was preferable. How many soldiers had died believing her lies? How many had chosen suicide over to surrender because her broadcasts had convinced them mercy did not exist? And now she knew. Mercy existed. Americans had shown it consistently, relentlessly, even when their prisoners struggled to accept it, even when ideology fought against lived experience, even when hate would have been easier than kindness. Her voice had killed people. That truth was inescapable. And going home meant facing it, facing families of soldiers who died, facing a nation that had believed the same lies she had broadcast, facing the impossible task of explaining that everything was wrong, that the enemy was human, that propaganda was fiction designed to keep people fighting past any hope of victory. Hana feared her parents. 19 years old, youngest of the group, her parents were nationalists. True believers in Japanese superiority, in Bushido code, in the divine mission of the emperor. They would see her survival as disgrace. Better she had died with honor than lived as prisoner of barbarians. Except the barbarians had not been barbaric. They had been professional, kind. They had followed rules. They had brought blankets at midnight. They had saved Keiko from suicide. They had moved 47 women to warmer barracks during a storm and provided care packages with chocolate. How could she explain that to parents who believed Americans were demons? How could she make them understand that the enemy had been more humane than their own government, that Geneva Convention mattered, that civilization survived even in total war? She could not, so she would lie. Tell them she suffered. Omit the kindness. Hide the truth that might shatter their worldview. Better to lie than force them to confront that everything they believed was fiction. But the lie would sit in her stomach like poison, corroding from inside, making her complicit in the same propaganda she now knew was false. Medical clearances began. Each woman examined one final time. Captain Margaret Sullivan conducting assessments personally, checking vitals, reviewing medical histories, ensuring everyone was healthy enough for the journey, providing medications for those who needed them, vitamins for everyone, extra rations to build strength for the voyage. Sullivan met with Emiko privately. Small office, 2 chairs, cup of tea between them, the translator present but quiet, letting the women have a moment of human connection that transcended language barriers. Sullivan pulled out a photograph. Young man in Navy uniform, maybe 22, dark hair, kind eyes, smiling at camera with confidence of youth that does not yet know death is possible. This is my son, James Sullivan. He is 22 now. Emiko looked at the photo, saw the resemblance. Mother and son, same eyes, same shape of face. Sullivan continued. Her voice was steady, but Emiko could hear emotion underneath. Carefully controlled, but present. In 1943, his destroyer was torpedoed. by Japanese submarine, near Solomon Islands. The words hit like physical blow. Emiko's breath caught. This woman's son, almost killed by Japanese military, and she had spent 4 months protecting Japanese prisoners, feeding them, bringing them blankets, saving one from suicide. The ship sank in 4 minutes. 37 men died. James was in water for 2 days before rescue. He survived. Barely. Sullivan paused, gathering herself. When she continued, her voice was quieter, more raw. He came home with nightmares, wakes up screaming, thinks he is drowning, post-traumatic stress, what they are calling it now. He cannot sleep more than 2 hours at a time, cannot go near water, cannot hear loud noises without flinching. Another pause, longer. Then she looked directly at Emiko. Eye contact that conveyed more than words could. For 6 months, I watched my son suffer. I could have hated all Japanese people, blamed everyone who looked like you for what Japanese military did to my boy. That would have been easy. Natural, even. Hate is simple. Hate requires no thought. She placed the photo on the desk between them. Her hand rested on it gently, protectively. But hate is poison. It destroys the person carrying it more than the person it targets. James is alive. Those 37 men are dead. Their mothers cried. But you did not cause that. Your daughters did not cause that. Wars are started by old men, fought by young men, and suffered by everyone else. Sullivan leaned forward slightly. I kept my promise to protect you because my son almost died so we could build something better. Better than revenge. Better than hate. Better than endless cycles of pain. He survived so that maybe we could learn. Maybe we could choose differently. Maybe mercy could matter more than vengeance. Emiko could not speak. Tears streamed down her face. Silent. Overwhelming. This woman, this American captain whose son nearly died at Japanese hands, she had protected Japanese prisoners, had brought blankets, had saved Keiko, had promised safety and kept that promise even when it cost her emotionally. Sullivan stood, walked to a cabinet, pulled out 3 items, placed them on desk. For Emiko, medical textbook in Japanese. Comprehensive. Current. Rebuild Japan's hospitals. Use knowledge from both sides. Heal people. For Sakura, radio equipment manual. Technical. Detailed. Use your voice for truth now, not propaganda. Help people understand what really happened. For Hannah, the photograph of James Sullivan. Remember that even enemies have mothers who love them. Remember that humanity transcends nationality. The gifts were not just objects, they were symbols, recognition that these women would return to broken country, that they would face judgment, that they would need tools, not just physical tools, but spiritual ones. Proof that mercy existed, that rules mattered, that civilization survived. Emiko accepted the textbook with both hands, bowed deeply, traditional Japanese gesture of profound respect. Sullivan bowed back. Not quite right, American woman trying to honor Japanese custom, but sincere, real, human. That afternoon, Crawford approached Emiko in the courtyard. She was sitting in winter sun, rare warm day, thinking about everything. About Yuki, about going home, about whether she was brave enough to tell the truth about her captivity, or coward enough to hide it. Crawford stood awkwardly, 35 years old, combat veteran, man who had carried rage for 8 months, now carrying something else, something harder. Transformation was not dramatic, not sudden, just slow accumulation of moments that made hate impossible. Watching Hana laugh at a movie, watching Sakura cry over chocolate, watching Emiko save chocolate bars for a daughter she might never see, watching Keiko choose death and Sullivan refuse to let her die, watching 47 women slowly remember how to be human after years of being told they were expendable. He pulled something from his pocket. Small box, worn, carried for months. He opened it. Inside were dog tags, military identification. David Crawford, age 19, USMC, blood type O positive, died February 23, 1945. Iwo Jima. The translator came over. Crawford had requested him. Knowing this conversation needed clarity, Needed precision, needed to mean something permanent. Crawford spoke slowly, each word chosen carefully, weighted with emotion he usually hid. My brother died at Iwo Jima. He was 19, youngest of 3 brothers, best of us. He paused, looking at the dog tags in his palm. He wanted to be a teacher after the war, wanted to help kids learn. He was soft that way, always helping, always choosing kindness, always believing people were fundamentally good. Another pause, gathering courage. Your people killed him, Japanese soldiers, infantry who pulled triggers on black sand beach. For 8 months, I hated every Japanese person I saw, hated you when you arrived. His voice cracked slightly, just slightly. But I watched you work, watched you cry over rice, watched you laugh at blankets, watched you save my life when you could have let me die. He looked up, met Emiko's eyes directly. David would have helped you. He was like that, always helping, always choosing kindness even when hate was easier. I dishonored his memory by hating. I honor it now by giving. He held out the dog tags, offering them, the most precious thing he owned, the last physical connection to his brother, the proof that David had existed, that he had mattered, that his death meant something. For your daughter, for Yuki, so she knows good Americans existed, so she knows David's name, so she knows he died believing in something better than hate, so she knows his brother learned that lesson, eventually, even though it took too long. Emiko took the tags with shaking hands, held them carefully, reverently. Understanding the weight of this gift, not just metal, but transformation made tangible. Proof that individuals could choose differently than their nations. That mercy could transcend nationality. That humanity survived even total war. She bowed, deeply, holding the dog tags against her chest. When she straightened, tears were streaming down her face. I will tell her about David, about his kindness, about his sacrifice, about his brother who chose mercy over hate. She will know his name. I promise you this. She will wear these. She will remember, and she will teach her children. Your brother's memory will live in Japanese hearts. That is honor. That is what matters. Crawford nodded, could not speak, turned away quickly. But Emiko saw his shoulders shake, grief finally finding release. Not just grief for David, but grief for 8 months of hate that had accomplished nothing, that had honored nothing, that had only corroded his own soul. Choosing mercy was harder than choosing hate, but it was also the only choice that meant anything. February 17, 1946. Departure Day. The women dressed in clothes Americans provided. Simple, clean, whole. They packed small bags, gifts, chocolates, letters, dog tags, medical textbooks, photographs, radio manuals. The physical evidence that this had been real, that mercy had existed, that promises had been kept. They assembled in the courtyard. 47 women who had arrived expecting death, who had hidden in basement with sharpened spoons, who had believed propaganda, who had been wrong about everything. American staff gathered to see them off, guards, nurses, kitchen workers, everyone. Many had tears in eyes. These prisoners had become people, known individuals, women with names and faces and stories, not just enemy combatants, humans who had survived trauma and slowly learned to trust again. Corporal Daniel Hayes approached Sakura, 20 years old, Iowa farmer, boy who had tried to learn Japanese from a phrase book, who had pointed at objects and said words and smiled when he got pronunciation wrong. He handed her a small dictionary, English to Japanese, handmade, his own handwriting, dozens of phrases he had learned over 4 months. For you, so you remember. Friends. He tried to say it in Japanese, mangled the pronunciation completely, made Sakura laugh through tears. She hugged him impulsively, breaking all protocol, all military bearing, just human gratitude that transcended rank and nationality in war. Dr. Chen shook each woman's hand formally. 58 years old, Chinese-American, World War I veteran, man who understood what hate did to humans. He spoke to each woman briefly through translator, thanking them for their compliance, their patience, their willingness to be healed. To Emiko, he said something extra. Use that textbook. Rebuild hospitals. Heal people. Show them that knowledge has no nationality, that medicine serves humanity. Not governments, not armies, people. Captain Sullivan walked the line slowly. Personal word for each woman. To Keiko, the one who had tried to die, the one Sullivan had saved. Choose life. Every day. Promise me. Keiko's response was quiet but firm. I promise. I will live. I will tell my sons that their mother survived because an American officer refused to let her die. They will know mercy exists. Tihana, be brave, be kind. The world needs both. Tell your children the truth, even when truth is complicated. To Sakura, your voice matters. Use it wisely. Tell people what really happened. They deserve to know. To Emiko last, Sullivan took her hands, held them. Two mothers, two women who understood what it meant to almost lose everything, what it meant to choose life over ideology, what it meant to protect others even when protection was hard. Yuki is lucky to have you as mother. Tell her Americans were human. Tell her rules mattered. Tell her about the blankets. Tell her everything. Emiko nodded, could not speak, just nodded and held Sullivan's hands and understood that this was goodbye, that they would probably never meet again, that their lives would diverge back to separate nations, separate worlds, but that this moment would matter forever. I will never forget. None of us will. You saved us, not just from death, from hate, from believing we were worthless, from accepting propaganda as truth. You showed us humanity survives. That is the greatest gift anyone can give. Loading onto trucks, same trucks that had brought them 4 months ago, but everything different. They were different. World was different. Reality was different. The ship journey was 2 weeks at sea. Pacific crossing, same ocean, opposite direction. Then they had been terrified prisoners expecting death. Now they were survivors carrying complicated truths, carrying evidence that enemies could be human, that mercy existed, that Geneva Convention was not fiction, that some Americans followed rules even when it was hard, even when their own people suffered. They talked constantly during voyage, processing, debating, arguing sometimes about what they should say when they returned. Whether to tell truth about treatment, whether families would believe them, whether honesty was brave or foolish. Emiko made decision for herself. She would tell truth, all of it. Her daughter deserved truth. Not more lies, not more propaganda, not sanitized version that made Japanese feel superior or Americans seem demonic. Just truth, complicated, uncomfortable, real. Others disagreed. Better to say they suffered. Better to omit kindness. Better to protect families from having to confront that their government had lied, that their ideology was false, that the enemy was more civilized than they had been told. But Emiko held firm. Lies had started this war. Lies had kept it going past any reasonable hope. Lies had made soldiers die, choosing suicide over surrender. More lies would not heal anything. Only truth could do that. Truth and time, and the willingness to accept that reality, was complex. That good and evil were not distributed along national lines. That humanity transcended politics. March 5th, 1946, Yokohama Port, Japan. The coastline appeared at dawn, smoke still rising from some areas, cities visible from sea, or where cities used to be. Tokyo was ash and rubble, Yokohama damaged but functional. Occupation forces everywhere, American flags, American soldiers, the occupiers who were also rebuilders, who were feeding starving people, who were distributing medicine, who were following plan for reconstruction that seemed impossible but was happening anyway. The dock was crowded, families waiting, signs with names written in shaky characters, desperate hope on faces, hoping, fearing, knowing many would be disappointed, many prisoners had died, many families would receive no reunion, just confirmation that loved ones were gone forever. Emiko scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces, father, mother, neighbors, anyone who knew where Yuki was, who could tell her if daughter was alive, if home still existed, if there was anything to return to. She saw them. Father, much thinner than memory, gray hair, eat face, decade older in 18 months. Mother beside him, small, anxious, clutching handkerchief. They stood with neighbor woman. No Yuki visible. Amiko's heart dropped. Daughter dead after all. Everything survived for nothing. She approached slowly. Father saw her. His face showed something complicated. Relief, confusion, judgment perhaps. She looked healthy, well-fed, gained weight. He looked like his skeleton, barely covered with skin. "Where is Yuki?" Her voice came out strangled, desperate. Father's expression softened slightly. "She is alive. At neighbor's house. Did not want her to see this. Too overwhelming. Wanted to confirm you first. Then bring her." Relief flooded through Emiko so powerfully she nearly collapsed. Daughter alive. Everything else was secondary. Everything else could be managed. Survived. Endured. But Yuki was alive. Father studied her face. "You look healthy." Statement carrying layers. Accusation. Relief. Confusion. How could prisoner look better than civilian? How could defeated soldier look well-fed while family starved? The Americans fed us. Simple statement. Just fact. Father's face hardened. They fed you while we starved, while Yuki went hungry, while Tokyo burned and we ate weeds. No good answer to that. No response that would make sense. No explanation that would justify her wellness in face of their suffering. They followed rules. Geneva Convention. They treated prisoners according to international law. So did they hurt you? The question was quiet, but carried weight. He needed to know, needed to understand if survival came with costs that could not be spoken aloud. If she had been violated, degraded, if her health came from collaboration, or worse. No, they treated us with dignity. They gave us food, beds, medical care. They brought us blankets at midnight because we were cold. Father stared at her, processing, trying to reconcile this with everything he believed about Americans, about enemies, about war. We will discuss later. Now we get Yuki. Reunion happened at neighbor's house. Small structure, one of few buildings still standing in neighborhood. Yuki was in back room, playing with scraps of paper, drawing, like she used to draw before war consumed everything. Amiko entered slowly, seeing her daughter for first time in 2 years, 7 years old now. Thin, painfully thin, hollow cheeks, legs like sticks, but alive. Drawing flowers, still wanting beauty in world that offered mostly ugliness. "Yuki," the girl looked up, confusion on face, studying Amiko, not recognizing immediately. Mother had left thin but strong. This woman was heavier, face full, skin had color. She looked wrong, too healthy, too well. Then recognition hit. Mama, uncertain, questioning, as if maybe this was trick, dream, hallucination from hunger. "Yes, it is me. Mama is home." Yuki stood slowly, approached carefully, like approaching wild animal, uncertain if this was real. She touched Amiko's face with small hand, feeling its roundness, its substance. "You are soft. Your face is round." Child's observation. No judgment, just statement of fact. But Amiko felt shame anyway. How could she explain that while daughter starved, mother ate rice and fish and miso soup? How could she justify her health in face of Yuki's fragility? She pulled chocolate bars from bag, 3 of them, saved from canteen. Proof that America had abundance, that mother had survived to return, that love persisted even when everything else failed. "For you, from America, from the enemy." Yuki took them carefully, stared at bright wrappers like alien artifacts. Her voice was small. "Enemy made this, yes, enemy who fed me so I could come home to you." No more explanation needed, not yet. Later she would tell full story, but now just reunion. Just holding daughter who was too thin, who trembled from malnutrition, who needed food and time and peace to heal. Father stood in doorway, watching. His face showed internal battle, wanting to hate Americans for destroying Japan. But they had kept his daughter alive, had fed her, had returned her home healthy enough to help rebuild. The contradiction was enormous, impossible to resolve quickly. Finally, he spoke. We go home. What is left of it? Life in occupied Japan was hard. Family's house destroyed in firebombing. Living in borrowed room. 11 people in 3 small spaces. Food scarce even with American aid. Everyone thin except Emiko. Everyone struggling except prisoner who had been fed by enemy. Emiko worked as nurse at makeshift hospital, using techniques learned from Captain Sullivan and Dr. Chen, treating patients with dignity, with care, with recognition that every human deserved professional medical attention regardless of who they were or what they had done. Some people praised her, called her brave, recognized that survival was achievement, that returning with knowledge was gift, that American medical training could help rebuild Japanese healthcare. Others whispered, called her traitor, implied she had done shameful things to survive, that her health proved collaboration, that honorable women would have died rather than accept enemy mercy. Emiko ignored whispers, held her head high. She had survived. That was enough. She would not apologize for living, would not apologize for accepting kindness, would not lie to protect ideology that had caused suffering in the first place. Yuki asked questions. 7 years old, curious, innocent. Mama, were Americans mean? Emiko chose truth. No, they were kind. That confused me. Why? Because I had been taught they were monsters. They were not. They were people, just people doing their best in terrible circumstances. Yuki absorbed this, processed it with clarity only children possess. Children who have not yet learned to complicate truth with ideology. So propaganda was lies. Yes. Will you tell other people yes, even if they do not want to hear it? Father listened from the other room, said nothing, but something shifted in him, slowly, incrementally, accepting that maybe his daughter's survival was gift, that maybe her experience mattered, that maybe truth was more important than comfortable lies. Years passed, decades, 1950. Yuki, 11 years old, reading her mother's letters from camp, learning about 47 women in midnight blankets and Captain Sullivan who kept promises, learning that humanity transcends nationality, that rules matter, that civilization survives even in darkest times. 1951, 20 years after war ended, Sakura published memoir, When the Enemy Brought Blankets. It became bestseller in Japan, controversial, some praised, some condemned, but it told truth, complicated, uncomfortable, real. And Miko wrote forward, "This is our truth. Future generations deserve it. They deserve to know that mercy existed, that some enemies chose humanity. That Geneva Convention was not fiction. That promises were kept even when keeping them was hard." 1975, 30 years later, Emiko, 64 years old, received letter from America. Captain Margaret Sullivan, 70 years old, retired, living in Maryland. She had tracked Emiko down through Red Cross, through military records, through determination to know what happened to women she had protected. Never forgot you, never forgot the promise. Hope you are well. Hope Yuki grew up strong. Hope you told her the truth about what happened, about blankets and soup and promises kept. Emiko wrote back immediately, "You saved my life twice. Once by protecting me. Once by showing me humans can choose mercy. Yuki is 40 now. She is doctor. She treats patients with dignity, like you taught me. Your legacy lives in her patients, in everyone she teaches. You kept your promise, and it mattered, more than you can know." The letters continued for years, exchanged between old women who had been enemy and prisoner, who had become something else, something without proper name. Not quite friends because circumstances had been too unequal, but something deeper than acquaintances, something that recognized shared humanity, shared commitment to choosing mercy over hate. 1990, 50th anniversary of war's end. Documentary film crew interviewed survivors. 31 of original 47 still alive. Each told same story with different details. Midnight blankets, Japanese food, Captain Sullivan, Crawford's dog tags, Keiko's suicide attempt, the transformation from terror to trust. Hana spoke on camera, 59 years old now, gray hair, kind face, voice still carrying youth despite decades. They treated us like we mattered. That changed everything, not just for us, for our children, our grandchildren. We taught them that humanity transcends nationality, that mercy matters, that rules exist for reasons. Those lessons started with blankets brought at midnight by people who did not have to care but chose to anyway. 2001, Emiko, 84 years old, final interview before she died. Osaka apartment, small but filled with photographs. Yuki, now 60, head of major hospital. Grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Evidence that survival had purpose, that choosing life over ideology had been right choice. Documentary filmmaker asked the essential question: what was the most important moment of your captivity? Emiko's answer was immediate, clear, no hesitation. Midnight, November 1st, 1945. They brought blankets and tea. That is when I understood propaganda was lies. That is when I chose to believe in humanity again. Not because it was easy, because it was true. Why that specific moment? Because it was unnecessary. Geneva Convention required food, shelter, medical care. But blankets at midnight because we might be cold, that was beyond requirement. That was kindness, choice, humanity. And those things change everything. She pulled out dog tags from box on her desk. David Crawford, 19 years old, dead 76 years, but remembered, honored, kept alive through memory. American soldier's brother gave me these. For Yuki, so she would know good people exist everywhere. She wore them through high school, then gave them to her daughter, who will give them to hers. David Crawford died at 19, but his memory lives through generations of Japanese women who learned mercy from his brother's gift. That is victory. That is what matters. Her final words on camera were clear, deliberate, meant for future generations who would never know war firsthand. I am 84 years old. I watched empire fall, watched cities burn, watched people choose death over dishonor. But I also watched enemies choose mercy, watched captors become protectors, watched hate transform into humanity. That is the story worth remembering. Not who won, but who chose to be human when being human was hard. Emiko Watanabe passed away peacefully that night. Yuki beside her, holding her hand. Last words were simple. Tell them about the blankets. Yuki promised. I will, Mama, always. Present day, Tokyo, War Memorial Museum, exhibition on prisoner of war experiences, glass case containing artifacts, original wool blanket from 1945, preserved, protected, symbol of something larger than fabric, dog tags, David Crawford, chocolate wrapper from American Canteen, Sakura's memoir, photographs of 47 women, Captain Sullivan, Crawford, Dr. Chen, all the people who chose mercy. Plaque reads, in November 1945, 47 Japanese women expected cruelty as prisoners of war. Instead, American captors brought blankets at midnight. This act of unnecessary mercy represented the best of humanity even in worst of times. May we never forget, enemies are temporary, humanity is permanent. School children on field trip, teacher explaining, students listening with faces that show they cannot quite imagine war, cannot quite understand what it means to choose between hate and mercy when everything is terrible. One student asked the essential question, why did they bring blankets if they were enemies? Teacher's answer is simple. True. Because being human is more important than being enemy. Because rules matter. Because civilization is not about power. It is about what you refuse to do even when you have power. That is the lesson. That is what we teach. Elderly woman stands before the display. 70 years old. Yuki's daughter. Emiko's granddaughter. She holds her own daughter's hand. 7 years old. Same age Emiko's Yuki had been in 1945. 3 generations connected by blankets, by mercy, by promises kept. The great-granddaughter asks, why is the blanket important? Her mother kneels, eye level, speaking gently, because it represents choice. Americans could have been cruel, could have followed example their enemies set, could have chosen revenge over rules, but they chose differently. They chose to bring blankets at midnight. They chose to keep promises. They chose humanity. That choice matters. That choice always matters. The girl touches the glass, fingers spread against barrier between her and history, between present and past, between peace and war. Will people always choose humanity? Honest question. Difficult question. Question that has no certain answer. Her mother responds with truth, complex truth, real truth. Must always. Sometimes people choose hate. Sometimes people choose cruelty. Sometimes people choose ideology over humanity. But sometimes, when it matters most, some people choose mercy. That is what this blanket represents. The possibility that even in darkest times, mercy survives. That even when hate is easier, kindness is possible. That even when we are enemies, we can remember we are human first. The museum closes at evening. Visitors leave. Lights dim. But the blanket remains. The dog tags remain. The photographs remain. Physical evidence that 47 Japanese women expected death and received blankets. That mercy existed. That promises were kept. That humanity survived. And in homes across Japan, in Tokyo and Osaka and Nagasaki, in cities rebuilt from ash, in nations transformed from enemy to ally, the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of those 47 women tell the story. Pass it down, keep it alive. The story of midnight blankets, of enemies who chose mercy, of promises kept when breaking them would have been easier, of humanity that survived total war, of the simple truth that being human matters more than being enemy, that rules protect civilization, that kindness changes everything. 76 years after 47 women huddled in basement expecting death. 76 years after Marines brought medical kits instead of weapons. 76 years after midnight blankets changed everything. The lesson remains. Enemies are temporary. Humanity is permanent. And mercy. Mercy is the greatest victory of all. That is the story. That is the truth. That is what the blankets meant forever.